Mr. Sally. Let's take it to Mr. Ememobong in Abuja studio. I understand Mr. Dantale Yusuf of IPAC has also joined us in Abuja studio. Mr. Yusuf, thank you for coming on the program. Ms. Aini, and we're also supposed to have the APC National Publicity Secretary, but perhaps there's been some mix-up. Maybe he will join us later on in the program because we want to have an expansive panel of both the ruling, opposition, IPAC, and the civil society organization. That's why we have ADC, APC, we're supposed to have APC, PDP, IPAC, and of course, Yaga Africa. Ms. Aini, let's come to you. This document, I'm sure, is very good for any political party that is interested in winning the election, because this is where strategy comes in. I want to know, and maybe Nigerians want to understand, from what you've seen so far, let's stay with the intention to vote, for instance. You're seeing that the Northwest and the Northeast, they're ruling in the number. Northwest, for instance, 67% of the vote, of the voters say, from the sample side, they say they are interested in voting. And then you see the South-South and the Southeast saying, look, maybe for some of the reasons listed, they don't trust the system and all of that. How, for instance, is the PDP looking, how will the PDP look at this particular data and be strategic about the next election?
Yeah, Jeff, good morning, and glad to be here. First is to thank Yaga Africa for this very data-driven disposition. And immediately our politics gets to the point of being data-driven. It makes it more predictable. And elections are the nexus of electoral democracy. And therefore, we must ensure that these processes are very well done. And I thank them for disaggregating the data, because it's one thing to have data, it's another thing to disaggregate the data, it's another thing to communicate the data. So, what that shows, like Doctor just said, is the fact that you have more people in the Northwest and Northeast, which are undoubtedly Nigeria's most troubled spots if you take away the North Central. And you know, there are times when things happen and you're asking, why are these things happening? And you're asking, so what can I do to ensure that this thing doesn't happen again? So I'm sure it's a natural reaction to the insecurity, to the lived experience that the people in the Northeast and Northwest are having. Now, when you get to the South-South and Southeast, you do know that, and you see that the trust quotient for the elections are very low, because you know the manner. And if you piggyback to even election results, you would see that the election results coming from the South-South and Southeast, particularly the Southeast, have always been very low. And it speaks to confidence, because immediately people think the most critical element in an election is the institutionalized uncertainty. Meaning that irrespective of what the poll says, on the morning of elections, people who are contesting and those who are voting must not be too sure of who is going to win. Meaning that even the person who is being pitched by polls and everyone, you know, must have some palpitations on the morning of election. That is why you would find that at the time when, if you check other democracies, the polls were saying when Hillary and Trump were contesting that, oh, Hillary was winning. But, I mean, you discover that up until when the election is announced, people, even the eventual winner, is still afraid. There's still some degree of palpitation. So when that is not so, when people can predetermine, you know, 3 months, 4 months to an election, the election becomes an event which is uneventful, meaning that it is just a date on the calendar. So people begin to lose interest in it. And so that is by my thinking, what is happening to the South-South and Southeast. Because over time, you have seen where the outcomes are predictable. You can see that people are now disillusioned, and people are now saying, do our votes count? And that critical question takes you to where you have many people, the percentage differential between those who have an intention to vote and those who trust the electoral umpire. And incidentally, you cannot divorce the electoral umpire from the elections. And like Cynthia said, while it is still work in progress, the conversion of an intention to an actual act is a work in progress, and a lot of things may happen that may add to the 77% or may detract from it, which is why this information is very important. And when you take that to the fact that last election cycle, only less than 27% of registered voters voted. It means that there's a challenge. Yes, more people have intentions now to vote, and I like the fact that she took us through the processes of data acquisition that shows representation. I like the fact that the representation is a mirror, is a very near mirror representation of Nigeria's demographics in terms of population, gender, and the age. So what that speaks to is that if 27% of the people voted in the last election and a winner emerged with less than 40%, 37% about that, it shows the crisis that we are going through, meaning that 26 years into democracy, democratic consolidation has not taken root to the point where people trust the institutions. How won't that trust deficit be there when you're promised by the electoral umpire that, look, we have a back end, we have IREV, and at the point of going to court, you now discover that the electoral umpire disowns his own innovation. How would you trust a system that the card system in 2015 did not recognize most people, and in some parts of the country you saw that incident forms were used other parts. So this is historical. It must not be taken just as a 2025 survey. It reflects historical anticipation, historical disappointment. So what does a political party like us take from this? This is information free of charge. And I must thank Young Africa, because this is something that political parties pay a lot of money to do for themselves and are doing for themselves. But this Young Africa data gives us another lens, because sometimes you pay people, and sometimes the agencies you pay tell you what you want to hear. So you just have confirmation bias. But coming from Young Africa, with their dispassionate disposition, this gives us an opportunity to compare and contrast, to juxtapose the data we have with what is coming. And I can tell you that it is very strategic, and when put to use, will become very useful, not just to political parties. The elections in 2027 is not about a winner, it's about who wins Nigerians, the heart of Nigerians, not just who wins the position.